Thanks for joining the Undiplomatic Podcast, the show with undiplomatic takes about the foreign policy scene. I'm Van Jackson, here with my co-host Julia Gledhill. What is good? It's been a minute.
Hi, y'all. It's been a sec, but great to be back. I missed yapping on here.
Mm-hmm. I get notes about you sometimes.
Oh, yeah. I
Yeah,
haven't
it's like,
disappeared.
hey,
The last
bring
couple
notes.
months have been a fever dream.
Yeah, no, it's tough. This isn't even the most important thing happening anymore, but Operation Spiderweb, this Ukraine fucking drone operation that like they're probably gonna make movies about at this point. Um,
Definitely.
Wild stuff, like Mission Impossible shit. For people who haven't heard about this, which is unlikely, it was planned for 18 months. It was 117 first-person view drones, FPVs. They're like little cheap quadcopters that you can like get on Amazon. 36 drones per truck container, and then the containers, the roofs are remotely retractable, and then the containers themselves self-destructed to destroy the evidence after the drones lifted out. These drones, which were quite cheap, they attacked 5 Russian air bases that were spread out over 2,500 miles, and Ukraine claims to have damaged or destroyed 41 Russian planes, including nuclear capable bombers and aircraft that are designed to like deliver cruise missiles that have delivered cruise missiles in Ukraine. It brings me back to my military nerd days because it's like, this is tactically brilliant. I think people are going to be studying this for decades. It kind of fulfills the promise of the drone revolution in a way. Like people who are like, see, I told you drones can shift the balance of power in essence.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
cost exchange ratio, you know?
I mean, they went straight for the air leg of Russia's nuclear triad in a really big way. Those 41 planes, I think, were like over 30% of Russia's strategic cruise missile carriers,
Mhm.
or at least that's what Zelensky has claimed. So, really big deal. I think provokes a conversation about the utility of air power and
This
continuing
is
to pursue it.
does this not like bolster every argument to basically get rid of the Air Force? You
Yes.
know? Like,
Yeah, let's get rid of the B-21. We don't need it. Why would we need these, like, super expensive, like, $100 million bombers to drop much less expensive bombs when instead we can do the low cost attributable thing that, like, is very much en vogue, but we're still, like, we can't do everything all at once. I'm a broken record on this point, but yeah, I do think that this is gonna be a really, really important case study for those of us who are skeptical, at least, of these really expensive bombers, particularly ones that are designed to carry nuclear weapons. The Trojan horse of 2025 are these truckloads of drones. It's wild. And the pictures are so cool. Um, I mean, in terms of nuclear escalation, like a little scary, but as you say, like on the merits, like tactically genius. The timing, I don't know, but
well, so that's kind of there's a lot of problems with this actually zooming out because it's like it's one move, it's one operation. The ability to replicate it within this same conflict is much reduced because you've done it. It's like you get to shoot your shot kind of once, you know,
Mhm.
and then it becomes dramatically harder to do this kind of thing again within the same conflict. You also don't win conflicts from the air. Like bomb power was always kind of a farce. War is
Yeah.
still a game of controlling territory.
Yeah,
So
like, at the end of the day, like, you can bomb all you want, but, I mean, what happens next, right? Like, don't you have to have people on the ground unless you're dropping nuclear bombs? But I agree, I'm skeptical. I do think, like, it would be hard to replicate this exact scenario, especially because I think that there were Russian people that were driving these trucks, presumably,
yeah,
like, I
unwitting.
do. Right, right, so they're how embarrassing, right? But also looking at the photos, I mean, the sort of decoy tops to these wooden sort of boxes that were purportedly carrying something else. I'm sure like the Russians were told something different, but, like, what could it possibly be? Because in the photos, I'm like, what would this be holding that isn't sus that you wouldn't look inside? Because like,
The
me, I'm a
box was labeled "Not drones."
yeah. Like, I don't understand how you don't, because like, if you're crossing borders and stuff, like, wouldn't you think that if you're a Russian driver, like, you're fulfilling some kind of mission, you're gonna maybe peek into one of the box just one of them,
Yeah.
just one. There were, like, over 100. I don't get it, but a feat to be definitely, just celebrated as a really tactical and smart move that, is pretty embarrassing to pull off, especially in the midst of, like, the peace negotiations, peace talks.
So that's also part of the trouble here is like this directly it's the timing of it directly undermined any kind of negotiations
Right.
like really moving forward. The idea that a machismo fascist guy like Putin is just going to absorb this passively is
Yeah.
unrealistic. You
Yeah.
know, like this actually, I mean, a lot of Ukrainians have been dying. I mean, it's a fucking war, but
Mhm.
a lot more are gonna die. Like Putin probably feels very justified in the ongoing atrocities. Like Human Rights Watch came out with a drone report about drone-based atrocities in Ukraine. And
Mm.
it's like he's doing fucking war crimes with drones. And so
Yeah.
like from Putin's perspective, it's like, yeah, and I'm about to escalate that shit. And so it's
Yeah.
like, if you care about people, tactical brilliance isn't enough. Like tactics is not strategy, you know?
Yeah. I mean, and you piss somebody off when you're gonna ruin planes that are worth like $7 billion, I
A
think is the
lot,
estimate.
yeah.
So, yeah, I don't see like, I think on its own, very cool, but in context, I don't know, like the sort of military gaming there, I don't
It
understand.
makes me wince to think about what comes next and
Right.
that this is like a desperate gasp, the dying light kind of thing. It's also I've the thing that is more profound though is like I see the NatSec bros in my periphery. They see in this only terror, which I think is a good thing, which is to say they realize that military superiority in the form of like lethal platforms, exquisite platforms is basically you cannot dominate militarily anymore like the way we have for the past 40 years. Like
Mm.
it's not possible. And that recognition takes the form of like anybody can do this kind of operation for a couple hundred grand and then paralyze a leg of our nuclear triad. Like there is nothing that's fully safe from this kind of thing. Like they don't have adequate countermeasures against these kinds of operations.
I mean, I've heard people make the argument for the B-21 to just say that it's good signaling, and it seems like a really
It's
expensive,
very expensive.
like, big liability, to take on just to signal strength,
Yeah.
to your point about sort of
Press
the
release is much
inability
cheaper.
to yeah, like, it's all for show, and there's sort of this unwinnable game that we're in terms of, like, yeah, trying to be the biggest, air power. I don't know, but I am excited to sort of see conversations unfold after this attack. I am a little worried again, like that it's going to just fuel like I think on again on its own as a concept, it makes a lot of sense to have really cheap, high quantity attributable drones for this purpose. But like replicator is so opaque, and I worry that like it's not fueling like a trade-off conversation here. It's just like we need more of this and everything else. So unfortunately that has not the sort of trade-off scenario, like, can't we just focus on one thing and see that as a priority and sort of scale back on these really expensive, exquisite programs? No, we have to do everything because of yeah, constituent interests basically in Congress.
Yeah, I don't think like the drone heads in the Pentagon, and they were especially ascendant in the Biden years, and like that's sort of that was my alternative path of life, in a different universe, like we were cooking that stuff up in the Obama years, but I don't think that we were wrong or that they were wrong in identifying drones as like a really dramatic step change in how wars will be fought and like what it means to express military power. But this is a slight tangent, but like George Orwell, literally right after we dropped the bombs, he wrote this essay, I think in the Atlantic, called like "You and the Atom Bomb" or some shit like that. And I teach it in a security studies class. And he's writing this at a moment when we've seen the awful power of these weapons, but we don't know
Mhm,
anything about these weapons. There has been no canon of like strategic studies and, nuclear deterrence theory. None of that stuff exists. We just know these are unbelievably sharp weapon. Like they can explode and destroy so much in such a compressed period of time that it's that time compression thing that makes them different. We can always kill people, but to be able to do it at scale efficiently with like in one moment, that's new.
mhm,
And what he was explaining was a kind of like materialist, tech reductionist view of history. And he's like, history is the evolution of weaponry. There are times when the dominant technology is rifles and gunpowder, and it empowers the individual person, and that is a weapon against tyranny. And
mhm,
ultimately, like, this allows for some hope for democracy. And what he points to, like, nuclear weapons as being this other kind of weapon that consolidates a generation or more of tyrannical, basically, nation states. Like, people have no chance, democracy has no chance in a world of nuclear weapons. It's going to be only small handfuls of extremely well resourced tyrants that are able to get these kinds of weapons. Um, they engender secrecy. We're going to fight to keep others from getting what we have. Blah blah blah. It's like he described the Cold War. He's like, these are going to usher in an era of peace that is no peace, which is what the Cold
mhm.
War was, right?
Yeah,
And so all of that is to say that in that context, from that Orwell point of view, drones are something beyond the nuclear weapons were the dominant technology of the Cold War. Drones may well be the dominant technology of this era that we're in. And like what I see is that control, the national security states are the tyranny that Orwell talked about. And their ability to control and dominate and do Death Star shit is simply countered or checked much more easily by this kind of technology. And so there's a kind of hope in it, but the way that the national security state metabolizes all this is to basically try to adopt drones themselves, which you can do that, but you can't do that for the sake of domination. Like, it won't work. And
right.
so that's the like mental shift that has not happened, is like, oh, we can use these, we just can't use them to dominate, you know?
Mhm. Yeah, no, that tracks. I think that makes a lot of sense, and, like, I mean, the technology that we need to do swarms and for drones, like, this is the 6th generation kind of conversation happening around the fighter jet in the United States, but, like, having swarms of drones be able to fly, like, parallel or in, kind of, combination with fighter jets, like, the technology that we need to do that is kind of like what the Silicon Valley firms are doing, which is why they characterize their technology as the new nuke. But like we haven't, like you said, done the mind set shift where we are being sort of choosy about what types of technologies we want to develop because we still are pursuing nuclear superiority while understanding that there are low cost options. And so like I feel like it's funny because there's sort of an acknowledgement that like new technology now, drones and the software needed to operate them in a combat environment are like the new nuke, but we're still obsessed with this idea of superiority when in fact like a nuclear weapon literally and theoretically is supposed to be the low cost like deterrence option, and it just hasn't borne out that way because we're so obsessed with dominance. I don't know if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
No, it does. I mean, that's the like, if you bring in new technologies, but you're just holding to the same old strategy, then like things are not going to break your way. Like, the old strategy was predicated on a certain taking certain assumptions about the technology landscape for granted. Like, the
Yeah.
technology landscape had a lot to do with the strategy that you chose back in the day. And Now the reality has changed, but your strategy kind of hasn't, you know?
Right.
Um, yeah,
Right.
yeah. Anyways, this is some nerd shit.
Yeah.
Um, so, okay. Well, okay, I was gonna talk about the South Korea presidential election, but maybe we should do, like, the just hit Palantir real quick.
Yeah, I was gonna say that might be a
But
more natural
actually,
transition.
yeah, yeah. So everybody is suddenly shitting on Palantir, and, like, I love to see it. It kinda makes me feel like I'm not crazy after all, and its CEO, Alex Karp, is I mean, I hate this guy, but he is what idiots think a smart person is.
I
You
know.
know, like a
Yeah.
wacky, zany, nutty professor, but also a cold-blooded fascist. And you know he's bad and Palantir is bad if you didn't have any facts, but only knew that Alex Jones is currently out there publicly defending Palantir, which is
Is
like,
he? Know
yep,
that.
not a good look. Yeah. I'm not sure what the timing is for like all of these critiques coming out, but the one thing that seems to be the newsy thread is, or the news peg is that like they're gonna be Palantir is gonna be providing the Trump administration with like some kind of like totalitarian surveillance platform of all Americans, like
Yeah.
the database of some kind.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the right wing influence, I don't know what to call them, like the Nick Fuentes types are freaking out. They're freaking out. He called it the ultimate betrayal for the White House to enter into talks with Palantir about what I understand is expanding a program that already exists, which is Foundry, to create the centralized database where the government can access your medical debts, your student loans, your bank account
They've
numbers.
been doing this. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just they're taking it to, like, the Minority Report level of, like,
Yeah.
predictive crime kind of shit, you know?
Right. Yeah, and it follows an executive order that the White House issued in March, which was called the Stopping Waste, Fraud, and Abuse by Eliminating Information Silos order. The purpose of which was to promote, again, heavy quotes here, interagency data sharing and eliminate bureaucratic duplication and inefficiency
Mhm.
while enhancing the government's ability to detect overpayments and fraud. You know, I think the biggest lesson I've learned since the beginning of the Trump administration, and this is an obvious one that like I knew, but it's really played out in such a nefarious way that it's just striking, really, is that the focus on waste, fraud, and abuse, of which I have admittedly directed a lot of attention in my work, is really just it is the compromise that you make instead of saying what's right and what's good, like what's actually
Mhm.
good policy, like even morals aside, just like what's actually effective and useful. And I think we've seen that be weaponized in this administration to such a striking degree that I worry that like anti-corruption work and actual like good governance work is going to be difficult to achieve or difficult to advance in an effective manner going forward because the Trump administration is discrediting it to this degree. Because when you start just actively going after people's privacy and therefore their civil liberties, then like it's going to require a total reframe going forward for the actual good governance groups doing this actual work around eliminating waste, fraud, and abuse who might not be out there on like foreign policy issues, for example.
There's yes. This is such a civil liberties nightmare at any pre-war on terror moment in US history. This level of sort of digital tyranny of surveillance by the state, it would have led people, reasonable people, to go out into the streets and attack the government, attack all the symbols of government, like war. This
Mhm.
is what it's civil liberties is such a basic constituent thing in the Republican tradition in America, and we kind of threw our rights away in order to do the fucking war on terror.
Yeah.
And Palantir was, an instrument of that, and it's become empowered by that, and it's gonna keep doing so. But it's like my immediate concern is the left and peace protesters and socialists. Like
Mm.
this is obviously going to be used against them. Palantir's already targeting. They're probably fucking listening to this shit, you know.
Yeah.
But if I'm like a MAGA far right militia guy or anything like that, if I'm in that political orbit, I should be thinking 2 moves ahead and be like, I don't want fucking, Nancy Pelosi to be able to direct Palantir to, monitor my attempts to storm the Capitol. I mean,
Right.
like this is like this is lose for everybody. Everybody who has a political project that is not aligned with the national security state, no matter how peaceful or how violent, is a target, you know? And this is the kind of shit, I mean, like enemy of the state type shit. I mean, like this, like the movie, this is once they have maximal information about you, they can like tweak it all and compile it in just such a way that if you're their enemy, they make you look like an enemy of the state itself, and like
Mhm.
it's just Orwellian shit.
Yeah, it really is. Big Brother's watching. He has been, but now it's like really in your face. And even the right wing MAGA types are freaking out over it. So yeah, privacy does matter. But as you say, this has definitely been on deck for a long time now in this
Yeah,
country.
not new, I mean, like, and I think that's part of the trouble here, like, it's demobilizing the non-novelty of this, like,
Hmm.
people are upset, but there's, like, a huge gap between people's correct feelings about something like this, and then the accountability of politicians making decisions accordingly, which they're not. There's, like, like, there's an unaccountability problem here anyways.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we're just kind of repeating mistakes of the past in a really big way because there is no systemic reflection that happens at all. And now that it's like affecting, frankly, conservative white people, now it's blasphemous.
I tweeted "Abolish Palantir," and then I had a message underneath it where it was like the Democratic Party should be rallying around that message, that bumper sticker, and they
Hmm.
won't because they are the party of militarism, it seems like, and they've made that choice. And also Palantir has donated to the DCCC in the last election, so
Oh yeah, of
and there
course.
are Obama people on the executive team at Palantir, so um,
Yes, yeah. I've gone to a couple of the I've like listened to a few talks with the Palantir types, and it's it's incredibly demoralizing. The thing that really pisses me off about Palantir is how they are continuing to posture like they are an outside group when they have been in this like space for I mean since the early 2000s, and they've generated like almost $1 billion in federal funding since like the beginning of this administration. Now all that money hasn't actually been like spent, but it's been like awarded from what I understand. So, and like almost half of their revenues are from government contracts at this point. They are not an underdog by any means.
well, what's funny is like they are an evil company. What they're actually doing, they don't own systems, hardware, like
Mhm.
platforms.
Yeah.
It's a data analytics company.
Mhm.
Like, reduce it down to like fancy Excel spreadsheets with gobbledygook in it. That's what
Yeah.
they fucking do. But they
Yeah.
do it for the Galactic Empire. They do it
Mhm.
for fucking Hitler. You know what I mean? And like that's the problem.
Yeah. It's a lot of army contracts. It's like the Project Maven, like reconnaissance, like vehicle, like whatever AI shit they need to like do that. Last time I checked. But yeah, no, it's wild. I do think that just PR wise, it benefits them that nobody really understands like what data analytics is. And
Very
there's
elite.
nothing like they're not like making anything
Yeah.
tangible. But yeah, I need to watch Andor. I know that you've been covering it in your other show. But I think that would be a really great time
It's good
to
shit.
watch.
It's good shit.
Yeah.
I didn't prepare for it, so I can't talk about it, but OpenAI also they have this white paper that came out not too long ago where Sam Altman's AI group, they
Mhm.
like paint a picture of what the world is. So it's like their geopolitics manifesto and like
Oh my
it's
god.
it's exactly like from the Palantir mold of like Western civilization, China threat, a world of great powers, like and the
Mhm.
contradiction of OpenAI is that like it claims to be like literally their masthead is like it's AI for the world, for the public good, but they are pitching in their white paper plan a world of like national security is our bread and butter in a world of like that's not like by definition national security is not good for the world. Like that's a
Yeah.
contradiction.
Yeah. How can you be for the world but focused on national
I know.
security?
I- Particularly when it's like you're all threat vectors. It's all like everyone's a bad guy, world of scarcity, blah blah blah. Like it's
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, actually, since you mentioned like the Western civilization obsession and focus, I guess, on the part of these AI forms, since you wanted to talk about state reorganization, I had a look at this large memo.
Oh, the State
Um,
Department, yeah.
yeah, so basically, I don't know if you want to explain it, but like there's this almost 150-page long memo directing the elimination or consolidation of like almost 3,500 US based staff positions at the State Department, entire bureaus dedicated to all sorts of things, conflict resolution being one of them. But I was going through like the offices that are purportedly going to be eliminated by July 1st without the input from the relevant congressional committees. And well, one of them is the Office of Global Change, which is what the government calls climate change. So no sweat there. But also, the majority of the Department of Human Rights and Labor regional offices are going to be eliminated. And the sort of personnel that remain are going to be realigned into a new office under a Deputy Assistant Secretary for Democracy and Western Values. So
Western
yeah,
values. It's so
Whatever the fuck that means. Advancing the administration's affirmative vision of American and Western values. That was one of the most bombastic, things that I saw in that memo.
it's so this is like this is the bureaucracy of white supremacy. Like we are trying to run a white supremacist foreign policy and like so in 2020 I was working on a project with a co-author where we were gonna try to like make the academic case, like a real like journal article type shit, explaining what a white supremacist ideal type foreign policy would look like, and
Mhm.
then use that as like a set of indicators against which you could like scan US foreign policy or anybody's foreign policy and be like, "Oh, this is some fucking racist bullshit," right? And
Yeah.
like that's who's benefiting, that's what it's doing in the world. And it got overtaken by events, but also like at that time my mindset had like not fully shifted politically,
Yeah.
and I was paralyzed by the back of the napkin analysis that US foreign policy by early 2020 was already lighting up every indicator of white supremacy. Like there was almost nothing in US foreign policy that didn't bolster a global color line in effect. I wasn't in a place to be able to accept that.
Yeah.
So I basically punted and I have no shortage of things to like distract myself with. But I really wish I would have like followed through on producing that research because like that's what's going on now too. And it's not that there aren't other ways of making sense of US foreign policy, but no matter how else US foreign policy functions, if it does the perfect ideal white supremacist approach to geopolitics, that ought to give us pause, that ought to be a reason for criticism, and that ought to be something that we like stridently fucking oppose.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
it doesn't get named, it gets laundered as Western values. I mean,
Yeah, it doesn't make sense to me. So I read like half of Alex Karp's book, The Technological Republic. I couldn't quite stomach the rest of it, but I mean one of his major arguments is I took notes on my phone, so I have to like look this up because this is like a couple months ago. But he talks about how like sort of technologists, innovators abandoned military contracting because bureaucracy is hard and it's difficult to work with the Pentagon, as all contractors say, but also because of a loss of our like national project and sort of a sense of national purpose and identity. And that happened in like the 1960s. I wonder what else was
that's
happening
quite
in
dog
that period. Yeah.
whistly. Your
Yeah.
dog is
And
whistling.
then he's like, so we hollowed out the American identity. And that's why like we innovators need to like take on military projects because it's how we reconstitute our national identity. So it's like, okay, so then our national identity is militarism then? Like there has been, I mean, he talks about like this loss of purpose, collective purpose in the 1960s. Like, what are you talking about? Like, that was a historic period, right, for the advancement of civil rights. And that I think is a direct sort of just evidence that he's really saying the quiet part out loud in just like a very, very disgusting way. And so absent like any other historical analysis. It's like, where are you getting this idea that we've lost our national purpose? Like, what? Huh?
This is the critical anti-imperialist and feminist and like world systems take on like the American state and especially the national security state has like that critical point of view has always been that militarism and patriarchy and white supremacy work together. MLK like named these forces as being unified and synergistic, you know?
Mhm.
And what Alex Karp is doing, because he was trained in critical theory, you know, and he's using it for fascist purposes, which deserves its
Yeah.
own kind of exploration. But like he knows those critiques. And what he's doing is literally taking those critiques and then owning them uncritically, like valorizing what critical theory critiques, basically. And it's like racism, militarism, these things go together in like a good way. But he's using a different rhetoric to describe them because you can't say, actually, it was great when we were racist. It was great, not that we're not now. It was great when women had to stay at home and couldn't have checking accounts,
Yeah.
which incidentally, I found out that that was the case all the way up to the 70s.
Yeah, it wasn't
So
that long
like
ago. I learned that in high school and I ugh.
so like our mothers were all alive at a time when they couldn't have checking accounts,
Oh, yeah,
like
that's
that's
why all the
crazy.
women in my family married people, like, inappropriately older than them by a lot. I mean, like, I'm also my family's from, like, the rural South Carolina, so that provides some context, but literally, like, every woman in my family was in a legally inappropriate, and by that, I mean, like, a statutorily, like, inappropriate, relationship, and that's why, like, you can't
Yeah.
do anything. The state reorg is crazy and concerning, and we're gonna lose a lot. A couple of the other things that struck me was, like, the Global Anti-Corruption Office and the Office of Classification Policy. I don't know if anybody read the declassification engine, but I was like, "Woo, this is gonna be really difficult, chapter in history to study in the future."
I know.
And now
It's
for
I
the for the ones
it's
trying to
just
write about it now.
it's so there aren't like collections of facts that you can operate from anymore that everybody accepts. Like this is part of the
Right.
like there's an enshittification of history happening,
Mhm.
like anyways. And then among these like State Department cuts, so like the actual budget itself may not actually be cut, but there's like all kinds of restructuring and reallocation happening. And so they're not even really saving money, but they're increasing spending on what they call diplomatic technology, whatever the fuck that is, by close to $1 billion, and it's being offset by cutting consular services by close to $1 billion, which is like
Yikes.
it's already super fucking hard to like get passports, get help when you're overseas if you're a US citizen, and like
Yeah.
now it's like good luck.
Yeah. Yeah, you're on your own. I think, like, my biggest takeaway beyond I mean, the Western values, the, like, getting rid of these important offices, all these things, it's just that, like, Congress has no idea what's going on, and they said that to the press. I mean, this is the type
Yeah,
of
they
thing
weren't
that you have to
notified,
notify.
like they hadn't seen this restructuring plan.
No.
Yeah.
No. We are in, I don't know. I think like some people are calling it like what, like competitive authoritarianism. Like this is um the level of congressional impotence is truly striking. And I know there's some members who are, doing what they can, but I also think that what's happening now is just downstream of Congress abdicating most of their duties, constitutional duties for the past like several decades. They're just professional fundraisers, basically.
Yeah. We're dealing with a world right now and with a US state that is like doesn't resemble the image that everyone in my generation and older had about America. And everybody is still kind of operating off of those old images though. I'm seeing these videos constantly of like normal folks confronting ICE and FBI and Homeland Security in the streets. Like we have actual Gestapo.
Yeah,
Great, like Stephen Miller is directing, DHS to not even go after criminals, but to go to places of work and like Mexican restaurants and shit to
yeah,
go after soft targets. The defunding of higher education, gutting of research, massive expansion of unemployment across sectors. You guys unfortunately are not very far away from having like massive shortages of imported goods, like cost inflation on everyday products that you need to live. Like
yeah.
it's so fucked. Criminalizing literally peace protests, the reduced space for dissent of any kind,
Mhm.
everybody who speaks out on behalf of equality is literally afraid. Like
Um,
this is this is not America of the unipolar moment. This is like colonialism done to white people, and it's like applies to everybody, and then meanwhile I see like conservatives in other countries and in Europe and shit basically doing the like Uncle Sugar is the one, like
God
they're
knows
on
why.
some unipolar moment shit still, and it's like
Yeah.
god damn, do you think America is a force for stability in this world? Like they're destroying every element of order that had existed, and some of those were not even good, you know?
Yeah, yeah, the moment has passed. We have some serious
We're still talking about
reposturing
like
to
South
do.
China Sea and shit like that. Like, we're not the defenders of anything noble at this point,
No,
Like,
you've made this argument, many others have, but, like, especially vis-a-vis China or great power competition, whatever you wanna however you wanna talk about it. I mean, like, domestic revitalization, rejuvenation, I actually think that, like, dealing with the, like, almost Gilded Era level inequality should be, like, the priority for the United States, and everything else follows. I think that ine income inequality, economic inequality, is kind of the core rot that we have to deal with in this country, and,
wealth
hopefully we can go
inequality.
about it.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Hopefully, we can go about it in a way that's going to, be in solidarity with working people everywhere, but we are pretty far off from actually going down that path. But perhaps it's a segue to talk about South Korea.
Actually, kind of, yes. So, Lee Jae-myung, he's kind of the Bernie Sanders of South Korea. He just won the presidency in a snap election by a wide margin. There's like a few things that are notable about this. The electorate is like every democracy, highly polarized, right? The polarization in South Korea is intense along two dimensions, though. Like one is generational and the other is gender. And so women overwhelmingly are responsible for Lee Jae-myung's victory. We can call him Lee. I mean, it's Lee, but Lee in
Mhm.
Korean is Lee. But women voted for him at a rate of like 2 to 1
Wow.
among those under 40. And then elder millennials, they of both genders voted overwhelmingly for Lee Jae-myung. But young men voted overwhelmingly against him. So, like, if you were under 20 years old, voted overwhelmingly against him. The olds voted against him, obviously.
Mm,
That's how this all shook out. And he, like, the Bernie Sanders comparison. Part of the reason it's not apt is that, like, Bernie himself didn't like bring himself up from poverty, didn't work in a factory. Lee Jae-myung did.
mm,
Like he has lived the destitute life. He fucking actually like he has like he has that identity of like a working class person.
mhm.
And so his priority, he tried to commit suicide when he was trapped in the cycle of bouncing from factory to factory and living hand to mouth.
Yeah.
He tried to kill himself, but the like pharmacologist or whatever could tell that he was like gonna abuse the pills he got and gave him the wrong pills. And that's
Mm.
basically what saved him.
Wow.
He's got like an incredible story. And so his priority, is the South Korean working class in effect.
Yeah.
What's less formed is what that translates into for everything else.
Right.
And he's operating under a lot of constraints because like South Korea is an export based economy in a world where like declining growth, like there's just like that's a huge constraint itself, you know.
Mhm.
But I mean, he's like a UBI guy, and not
Okay.
UBI as a substitute for the welfare state, but as a supplement, you know,
Cool.
like
Yeah. Yeah, and reading a little bit about him and about the economic situation in South Korea, I did not realize that South Korea has like one of the worst gender pay gaps in the OECD. It's like
yeah,
31% less than men, which is insane. I had no idea. And there's like really high levels of intimate partner violence as well. I'm
yeah.
curious. Obviously, there are some real obstacles for Lee to advance sort of like um, economic redistributive policies. Is the right wing or more conservative party in South Korea also doing populism in the way that like Trump did? I'm just curious, like, why would these young men be voting for the conservative option?
People are studying this because it's so extreme, but it is clearly part of like a global. I mean, like we have a version of this in America right now too, you know, like
Yeah,
young men who
totally.
vote MAGA. So
I mean,
like
it's like it's very it's kind of social more than it is economic well-being from my
yeah,
perspective.
the reason why the economic argument has supremacy is because it's cross national. Like if you see the same pattern emerging across nations with different socialities and different cultural arrangements, then the culture is not the explanation. The culture is downstream of the thing that's common to all these things. Like that's just
Right.
like social science brain. But so
Yeah.
like the economic argument is at the root of this, but the intermediary factors are that like cultural misogyny in Korea is like off the charts. Women have always had it bad in South Korea, you know, like it's a patriarchal society. It's
Mhm.
like it's encoded in Korean language itself. Like Korean language itself is extraordinarily hierarchical
Mm.
and gendered to a degree.
Yeah.
And so like it's your every aspect of your reality in South Korea has this inegalitarian gloss on it, you know? And like women have had to like kind of eat shit because of that. And so when women vote progressive, they are truly voting their interests in a way where it's like their taste of like freedom is at stake in a sense. That part makes sense, but you know, the younger generation males are not idealistic. They don't have opportunities. And it's way easier. Like if you're an indentured servant who's abused and then you go home and kick the dog, that's kind of what I feel like these young men are doing. Like they're going after softer targets, easier targets than oligarchs, you know,
Yeah.
than the ruling class, than powerful people. They go after what they think of as not powerful, which is scapegoats, which is, you know, women who won't sleep with them or, you know, immigrants who are taking their jobs. And like
Yeah.
it's just that simple. And then you get stuff like, you know, YouTube and Instagram like pumping them up with
Sure.
confirmation bias, basically, you know?
Right.
The reason why any of this matters from like a foreign policy perspective is that the progressives in South Korea have generally been like pro diplomacy toward North Korea. And they've
Mhm.
been at best, kind of ambivalent about the alliance with the US
Yeah.
and for a number of historical reasons. And so, like, there's a scenario here where if they're in peace talks with North Korea, it's not clear if that happens, but the thing that was missing when Trump did the peace talks before and South Korea did the peace talks in the earlier administration 5 years ago was the like material part of peace, like making good on it in a credible way, in a real way. It was all just rhetoric before.
Yeah, like taking troops out or something.
Taking troops out is the ultimate material shift, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? So, like, if you're North Korea, you have no reason to believe the sweet lies of, like, your enemy's president or whatever, but if troops are actually fucking relocating, totally
Mhm.
different. situation, you know?
Yeah.
And Trump already wants to remove, 4,500 troops or something from South Korea. So like that could be a kind of force posture shift in Northeast Asia. Um, and I would even bet on it, in fact. But my concern remains this is the restraint problem, right? There's like a way of doing restraint that's like MAGA restraint. And so the place where I've read that forces would go as the alternative, like you remove troops from Seoul or whatever, is fucking Guam, which
Yeah.
is non-sovereign, which is a giant sacrifice zone for US military strategy. The more we put our boots and bases there, the more incentive we have to keep them in this permanent colonial status, you know? So like
Yeah.
we're gonna exploit them.
Well, is this like, I don't know if this is a quite a clean way to put it, but like this seems to me like one of those instances where it's like realism versus restraint as opposed to restrainers and realists like actually overlapping because,
Yeah, yeah, that's a good way to
like
put it.
restrainers I think tend to be more interested in anti-imperialist foreign policy. I mean, realists obviously there's a lot of range, but yeah, that's a real conundrum.
Well, there's a way of doing restraint where you just do less or you just remove pieces from the board or whatever.
Sure.
And then but you haven't changed your mindset. You don't relate to the world any differently. You're still extractive, predatory, dispossessing. And
Mhm.
that's like the MAGA version of restraint or whatever, which is still empire in a way. And like the restraint approach to me that has promise is the restraint as a way of relating differently. So, like, yeah, you do move pieces on the board or withdraw pieces from the board, but it's not for the sake of it. Or to save money. It's because, like, that's one of the ways that you credibly relate differently to the world.
Yeah, I think like I don't know the answer to this obviously, but I think like what's so challenging is how to avoid being callous about it or being branded as callous about it by your allies. Like I don't know how you get around that.
Well, I don't know either. So, all right. One, I think, last story here. Oligarchy might be the theme or the fractures within oligarchy. But you had noted a piece in the BBC, I think it was, about Elon Musk and the reconciliation bill. Do you want to talk about that?
Yes, I've brought up reconciliation at every given opportunity this year, so I'm doing
Can
that
you
yet
like do a
again.
5-second explainer for?
Yeah, so reconciliation is a budget process that the majority party goes through to avoid the filibuster in the Senate. That's pretty much all you need to know. It is a untraditional path for um, a party that has typically the White House, the Senate, and the House to just like avoid having to deal with the minority party putting up a real fight. It's also the mechanism through which we have gotten the IRA passed, the Inflation Reduction Act, the Affordable Care Act, like big, like hallmark bills in US history. So Democrats and Republicans have used it. But it is like inherently kind of an undemocratic process because you don't go through what's called regular order. There's a lot less deliberation around it. And this year, the Trump administration's or Congress's sort of reconciliation package is, I think, unique in that it really pushes the boundaries of what you can actually accomplish through reconciliation. It is supposed to sort of have a very narrow scope, and they're doing like extensions of tax credits and also cutting spending. They're doing all sorts of things that have sort of like really big impacts on the budget that typically you wouldn't be able to like do through reconciliation. That's like my best layman's attempt to explain reconciliation.
Pretty good. That's pretty good.
But yeah, so Elon's crashing out, unsurprisingly. We
On
knew that
fuck
this was gonna
Also, yeah,
happen.
he's like discovered where he's on ketamine and
Oh
LSD and
yeah.
like all kinds of shit. Like,
No shit. No, like, of course. He's gotta be medicating himself to run several businesses and be a special government employee for the past, like, 4 months or whatever. But yeah, he's crashing out today. It's Thursday, June 5th. I'm sure y'all I feel like the NPR people. Um, But it's pretty funny to watch. I'm sure everybody's seen it on Twitter. Elon and Trump starting off Pride Month by ending their bromance, and it appears to be over the reconciliation package, which the Trump administration has been supportive of for a while now. It's called the Big Beautiful Bill. Trump from the beginning was really pushing for one bill as opposed to two to cover like several of the next fiscal years. But
This is a
what's
big gutting of the welfare state and a big
yeah,
giveaway of tax breaks. That's what this
yeah.
big
So
beautiful
it
bill.
would add like almost 4 trillion to oh no, it would be a 4 trillion almost 4 trillion decline in revenue because of extended tax cuts, and most of the spending cuts are welfare related programs, a lot of food assistance and Medicaid. And this would add trillions to the deficit, of course, and it would require Congress to increase the debt ceiling, which Trump wants to get rid of completely. And he's been very inconsistent on that. Obviously, Elon today has like spent a lot of time tweeting out his stuff from like 3 years ago when Biden was pushing through a reconciliation package, saying like any lawmaker that isn't balancing the budget should, abdicate, not abdicate the throne, leave office.
It's a throne,
Although
it's a
it feels
throne.
that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I wanted to bring this up because the reconciliation package, as I've mentioned on this show before, is adding like $150 billion to our national security budget and another like 150-ish to the border. So it is just like an incredibly impactful, large increase to our federal spending on militarism and gutting anything that does things for people. There are real trade-offs um, on a local level in terms of, what folks are receiving in exchange. And, they're having their Medicaid taken away, they're having their food stamps taken away so that we can do Golden Dome, et cetera. Public Citizen and the Institute for Policy Studies have a really good report on the trade-offs on like a district state level, which is amazing. But yeah, Elon and Trump are finally falling out, and it's because Elon is pretending to be a fiscal hawk, and ragging on the deficit increases that are going to happen if this goes through. The Senate has yet to pass, but the House has passed the reconciliation package. And yeah, Elon all of a sudden cares about the deficit, or at least is pretending to, because basically he's not going to get his EV incentives that he wants because Trump is punishing him. So yeah, that's kind of my roundup of reconciliation. But I'm just like screaming from the mountaintops about it all year because it is so scary, and it is going to be really hard for us to move back from this. And as someone who spends time thinking about Pentagon spending, it's really the never ending battle, and it gets worse and worse. So,
I mean,
on
so,
that
like,
hopeful note.
yeah, this is fucking terrible and not probably not reversible, or it sets a new baseline of evil in our society, that from which to work, which is terrible. But, like, this is why, to me, the national security state and militarism is a form of class war from above. It's
Yeah,
not just that poor people disproportionately fight and die in the wars, which has always been true. It's
yeah,
also the guns versus butter reality.
yeah,
You have to to do this level of fucking spending, you have to cause more poverty. You have
yes,
to put more people out in the streets homeless. Like, you have to. You have to.
yeah.
Old grandma's got to die. More grandmas gotta die, you
Yeah,
know?
it's true. Like, I mean, on the topic of wealth redistribution, which has come up a few times in this conversation, like, I mean, the reason that I work on Pentagon spending it is the ultimate mechanism of wealth redistribute. Like, you have to have a meta high level way to redistribute resources, and then hopefully on, a more tactical level, you can get rich people to give away their money, basically. But
Yeah.
um like, there has to be, like, an individual mechanism for that to happen, but
Mhm.
it's, and I actually probably think that that has to happen first before we can get to a place where, the powerful or the rich are gonna support policies that are going to distribute resources in a way that fosters life and, allows people to thrive, right, in their lives, as opposed to spending money on bombers that we don't need and that can be I don't know, destroyed with drones. So
This is truly, like, the fuck people bill. You know, like it's
Yeah.
just giving a big middle finger to people, not even like a certain demographic, but it's just like people. If you're not a
Yeah.
billionaire, fuck you, you know?
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah,
the
and it's wild to see Trump and Elon also take up, like, criticisms of each other, that they've defended one another from, like, Trump today is like, "The easiest way to save money in our budget, billions and billions of dollars, is to terminate Elon's government subsidies and contracts." Like, he knows. And then Elon, "Is it time to create a new political party in America that actually
uh-huh.
represents," he says, "the 80% in the middle?" Huh? That's not the middle, that's the majority of people. What are you talking
Yeah.
about? And I actually saw someone talking about this on Twitter, I can't remember who it was, saying like, "Don't fall for it when Elon starts, posturing as a leftist in 2 days," because yeah, like, they know the arguments, they know the criticisms, and they cherry pick them to their benefit.
This is why you have to focus on who benefits. This is why, like, who benefits and who is harmed is my compass on everything, on everything, because it's the only way you can get to anything like the truth, you know?
Mhm.
Even beyond like, psychologizing people and stuff, like ultimately what's in their heart of hearts doesn't matter. What matters is who's benefiting from this and who is harmed, because that's what drives situations.
Yeah.
Um one zooming out thing that this all sheds light on is that like the oligarchy or the capitalist class itself has fissures within it, and like Elon has portrayed himself here as this austerity oligarch, which is its own
Mhm.
kind of oligarch. And the thing that makes that somewhat credible and more than just about the EV mandate, as we're talking about this, I realized he's the face of Doge. He really loves Doge. Doge is nothing if not that classic weapon of austerity. I mean, that's what it was.
Yeah.
And so like there may be something to his belief in, the fiscal hawk thing. But you also have like the abundance oligarchs who are mostly about deregulation. They
Yeah.
they are trying to consolidate wealth, hoard wealth, but they want to do it through don't don't tread on me, bro, which is a little bit Mark Andreessen types. The
Yes.
crypto bros want to institutionalize crypto and make it too big to fail. So that's their pet project. You
Mhm.
know, there are the national security fucking ghouls who are the oligarchs who are on the teat of the defense industrial complex, basically.
Yeah.
They depend on the infinite growth of the $1 trillion war machine. So that's like the Alex Karp oligarchs. And then you
Mhm.
have, I saw too, like there was like 2 days ago, the other co-founder of Palantir, Joe Lonsdale, he is in a beef with the Balaji, whatever the fuck his name is, the guy who's like the face of the network state. Do you know about this network shit?
Oh.
S-
I feel like I've heard his name.
it's a big deal in a pernicious way, but like basically the network state section of the tech right, they want to like secede from the American project and start like literally, and they want to create, it's under the guise of like special economic zone logic or whatever, but like
Okay.
they,
Okay.
they want to create their own political fiefdoms with new political boundaries that operate
Yeah.
autonomously from our system. And this is actually the root cause of why Trump wants Greenland. The critical minerals is like the national security state is smuggling that excuse in to launder it.
Yeah.
The network state guys since Trump 1.0, there's like white papers about this.
Oh
They
my
want
gosh, I had no idea.
they want Greenland as their home base for a new political project.
Wow. Have you seen Mountain Head?
No, I need to see it.
You need to see Mountain Head. It sounds exactly like this. It's, like, just a bunch of tech billionaires. Steve Carell is one of them. I didn't, like, really recognize the other actors, but yeah, like, 5 tech billionaires have, like, a bros weekend at a really fancy mansion in Utah, and basically, like, one of the tech billionaires platform causes just a complete eruption of like ethnic violence in like Kazakhstan, or maybe it's Uzbekistan. Anyway, but it's like because they roll out new features
I
on
gotta
their
see this.
on like a Twitter like platform, and it's essentially AI that creates like fake videos of people burning, you know, churches and stuff like that. It sounds exactly like this
This
though.
is so real.
It was so hard to watch. My friend made me watch it last weekend, and I did not have a good time because it did feel extremely realistic. Like, I've met men like that,
Yeah.
and, you know, it's one of those movies where there's 5 people in it, so you're kind of married to them,
You're
but,
stuck with them. There's nobody to
you're
root
stuck with
for.
them.
Yeah.
There's nobody to root for, everybody sucks. The only women in the movie are in, like, domestic support or admin support roles, and I was just like, "I can't do this, I hate this so
Surprise.
much."
Yeah.
Yeah, anyway, but extremely relevant.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, and they talk
Really
about,
gotta
like,
watch that.
transhumanism and, like, uploading the human consciousness and, um, yeah, they think that they're more real than the average person. It was just, like, all very unsettling, to say the least.
God damn. Well, yeah, these guys are fucking terrible. This is like it's worth paying attention to. I have no hot take, but it's worth paying attention to like where there are tensions within the capitalist class coalition because
Totally.
that's our only hope, frankly. It's like exploiting the fissures. So, anyways, okay. Well, this was a
Yeah,
rich dump.
lot to
Yeah,
discuss, big episode back. It was good, though. I enjoyed
yeah.
it.
All right. Well, okay. Like and subscribe, all that stuff.
See you next time.
Peace. All right.
Bye.